Hey guys, so today we're reading chapter 4. Without further ado, I will simply start. Chapter 4: Surrender, Escape, and Counterattack. Life traps actively organize our experience. They operate in overt and subtle ways to influence how we think, feel, and act. Different people cope with life traps in different ways. This explains why children raised in the same environment can appear to be so different. For example, two children with abusive parents may respond to abuse very differently. One becomes a passive, frightened victim and remains that way throughout life. The other child becomes openly rebellious and defiant, and may even leave home early to survive as a teenager on the streets. This is partly because we have different temperaments at birth. We tend to be more frightened, active, outgoing, or shy. Our temperaments push us in certain directions. And it is partly because we may choose different parents to copy or model ourselves after. Since an abuser often marries a victim, their children will have both serving as models. The child can copy the abusive parent or the victimized parent. 3 life trap coping styles: surrender, escape, and counterattack. Let us look at 3 different individuals: Alex, Brandon, and Max. Each one has the defectiveness life trap. Deep down, all 3 feel flawed, unlovable, and ashamed, yet they cope with their feelings of defectiveness in entirely different ways. We call these 3 styles surrender, escape, and counterattack. Alex. He surrenders to his sense of defectiveness. Alex is a 19-year-old college student. When you meet him, he does not look you in the eye. He keeps his head down when he speaks. You can barely hear him. He blushes and stammers, puts himself down in front of other people, and is constantly apologizing. He always takes the blame for things that go wrong, even if they are not really his fault. Alex always feels one down, inferior to others, and he constantly compares himself to others unfavorably. He feels that other people are somehow better. Social events are invariably painful for this reason. In his first year of college, he went to parties but was too anxious to talk to anyone. I couldn't think of anything to say, he explains. So in his second year, he has not attended a single college party. Alex has begun dating a woman who lives in his dorm. She criticizes him all the time. His best friend is very critical of him as well. His expectation that people are going to be critical is often borne out. The therapist says, "Why do you criticize yourself so much?" Alex says, "I guess I want to do it first before other people do it for me." Alex has a lot of feelings of shame. He blushes and walks around with his head down because he feels ashamed of himself. He interprets events in his life as continual proof of his defectiveness, unlovability, and worthlessness. Alex says, "I feel like such a social reject. We're halfway through the semester and I still don't know anyone in any of my classes. Other people sit around and talk, but I just sit there like a bump on a log. No one talks to me." Therapist says, "Do you ever talk to anyone?" Alex says, "Nah. Who would want to talk to me?" Alex thinks, feels, and acts as though he were defective. The life trap permeates this experience of life. This is how it is with surrender as a coping style. The life trap is very much with us. Alex is well aware of his feelings of defectiveness. When we surrender, we distort our view of situations to confirm our life trap. We react with strong feelings whenever our life trap is activated. We select partners and enter situations that reinforce our life trap. We keep the life trap going. Alex constantly distorts or misperceives situations so that they reinforce his life trap. His view of situations is inaccurate. He feels people are attacking and humiliating him even when they are not. He has a strong bias to interpret events as proving he is defective, exaggerating the negative and minimizing the positive. He is illogical. When we surrender, we continually misinterpret and misconstrue people and events in ways that maintain our life traps. We grow up accustomed to certain roles and certain ways of being perceived. If we grow up in a family in which we are abused, neglected, yelled at, constantly criticized, or dominated, then that is the environment that feels most comfortable to us. Unhealthy as it may be, most people seek and create environments that feel familiar and similar to the ones where they grew up. The whole essence of surrendering is somehow managing to arrange your life so that you continue to repeat the patterns of your childhood. Alex grew up in a family that criticized and demeaned him, a typical origin for the defectiveness life trap. As an adult, he behaves in ways that ensure he will end up being criticized and demeaned. He chooses partners and friends who are very critical of him. He acts ashamed and apologetic. He criticizes himself in front of others. When people are nice to him, he distances or somehow undermines the relationship. Alex tries to maintain the status quo. When the environment becomes too supportive, he alters the situation so he can go back to that comfortable state of shame and dejection. If he feels superior or equal for a moment, he somehow manages to return to a lesser position. Surrender includes all the self-destructive patterns we keep repeating over and over. It is all the ways we replicate our childhood lives. We are still that child, going through that same old pain. Surrender extends our childhood situation into our adult life. For this reason, it often leads us to feel hopeless about changing. All we know is the life trap, which we never escape. It's a self-perpetuating loop. Brandon. He escapes his feelings of defectiveness. Brandon is 40 years old and has never had a close relationship. He spends most of his spare time yakking with his buddies at the neighborhood bar. Brandon is most comfortable with casual, friendly relationships where nothing very personal is discussed. Brandon is married to a woman who is out of touch with her feelings. She is very concerned with keeping up appearances. She is more interested in being married than in being married to Brandon particularly. She has close female friends but does not expect closeness from Brandon. She wants a man just so she can fulfill the conventional role of wife. Their relationship is based on traditional roles, not on real intimacy. They rarely confide in each other. Brandon has been an alcoholic his entire adult life. Although his family and friends have suggested Alcoholics Anonymous, he ignores them. He insists that he is not an alcoholic. He says he only drinks for recreation and that he has control over his drinking. Besides drinking in his neighborhood bar, he tends to drink in social settings when he is around people he feels are better than he is. Brandon became depressed, which is what originally brought him to therapy, but in contrast to Alex, he was not in touch with his life trap. He spent much of his life making sure that he was not in touch. When he first started therapy, he was only dimly aware of his feelings of defectiveness. When we asked him how he felt about himself, he denied having feelings of low self-esteem or shame. Later in treatment, these feelings came out very strongly. We had to battle his escape on every front. When we asked him to write down his negative thoughts for homework, he did not do it. He claimed, "Why think about things? They only make me feel worse." When we asked him to close his eyes and picture himself as a child, he said, "I can't see anything, my mind is blank." Or he saw an image of a photograph of himself as a child, devoid of emotion. When we asked him how he felt about his abusive father, he insisted that he felt no anger. "My father was a good man," he said. Brandon tries to escape his feelings of defectiveness. With escape, we avoid thinking about our life trap. We push it out of our minds. We also escape feeling our life trap. When feelings are generated, we dampen them down. We take drugs or overeat or compulsively clean or become a workaholic. And we avoid entering situations that might activate our life trap. In fact, our thoughts, feelings, and behavior work as if the life trap never existed. Many people escape whole areas of life where they feel vulnerable or sensitive. If you have defectiveness life trap like Brandon, you may avoid intimate relationships altogether, never letting anybody get too close. If you have the failure life trap, you may avoid work, school tasks, promotion, or taking on new projects. If you have the social exclusion life trap, you may avoid groups, parties, meetings, conventions. If you have the independence life trap, you may avoid all situations that require you to be independent. You may be phobic about going into public places alone. It is natural that escape becomes one of the ways we cope with life traps. When a life trap is triggered, we are flooded with negative feelings, sadness, shame, anxiety, and anger. We are moved to escape from that pain. We do not want to face what we really feel because it is too upsetting to feel it. The disadvantage of escape is that we never overcome the life trap since we never confront the truth. We are stuck. We cannot change things that we do not admit are problems. Instead, we continue the same self-defeating behaviors, the same destructive relationships, and trying to coast through life without feeling pain. We rob ourselves of the chance to change the things that are causing us pain. When we escape, we strike a bargain with ourselves. We will not feel pain in the short run, but in the long run, we will suffer the consequences of having avoided the issue year after year. As long as he escapes, Brandon will never get what he wants most, to love and be loved by another human being who really knows him. Love is what Brandon was denied in childhood. With escape, we give up our emotional life. We do not feel, we walk around numb, unable to experience real pleasure and pain. Because we often avoid confronting problems, we often end up hurting those around us. We are also prone to the terrible consequences of addictions like alcohol and drugs. Max. He counterattacks to cope with his feelings of defectiveness. Max is a 32-year-old stockbroker. On the surface, he is self-confident and assured. In fact, he is a snob. He has an air of superiority. He is very critical of others while rarely acknowledging any faults in himself. Max came to therapy because his wife was threatening to leave him. He insisted their problems were all her fault. Therapist. So your wife is pretty angry with you. Max, if you ask me, she's the one who's causing all the problems. She blows things out of proportion and she demands too much from me. She's the one who needs to be in therapy. In fact, Max chose a very passive, self-sacrificing wife who worshipped him. Through the years, he had become so verbally abusive and selfish that she had finally insisted that either they start therapy or she would leave. Max creates situations where he is one up. He chooses friends and employees who will flatter him rather than challenge and confront him. He enjoys feeling superior. He devotes most of his energy to gaining prestige and status. He manipulates and uses people in any way necessary to achieve these ends. He tried to stay one up in therapy as well. He questioned our credentials, approach, competence, level of success, and age, and he kept reminding us how successful he was. When we told him we thought he was treating his wife badly, he became infuriated. He insisted we did not understand his feelings. He insisted that we should be willing to give him appointments whenever he wanted them because he is an important person. When we refused, he again became angry. He felt he was not getting the special treatment he deserved. Max is not in touch with his life trap yet. It is very much with him. In feeling superior, Max experiences the opposite of what he felt as a child. He is trying to be as different as possible from the worthless child that his parents made him feel he was. We might say he spent his whole life trying to keep that child at bay and to fight off the attacks of those he expects to criticize and abuse him. When we counterattack, we try to make up for the life trap by convincing ourselves and others that the opposite is true. We feel, act, and think as if we are special, superior, perfect, infallible. We cling to this persona desperately. Counterattack develops because it offers an alternative to being devalued, criticized, and humiliated. It is a way out of that terrible vulnerability. Our counterattacks help us cope. But when these counterattacks become too extreme, they often backfire and end up hurting us. Counterattacks can appear healthy. In fact, some of the people we admire most in society are counterattackers. Some movie stars, rock stars, and political leaders. But although they fit well with society and are successful in the eyes of other people, they are usually not at peace with themselves. They frequently feel defective underneath. They deal with these feelings of inadequacy by putting themselves in situations where they will get the applause of an audience. Winning this applause is actually an attempt to compensate for a deep sense that they are worthless. They can counterattack by masking their flaws with success before they are discovered and put down. Our counterattacks isolate us. We become so invested in appearing to be perfect that we stop caring who gets hurt in the process. We continue to counterattack no matter how much it costs other people. There are bound to be some negative effects. Eventually, people leave us or retaliate in some way. Our counterattacks also get in the way of real intimacy. We lose the ability to trust, become vulnerable, and connect at a deeper level. We have met some patients who would rather lose everything, including their marriage, a relationship with someone they love, than risk becoming vulnerable. Eventually, no matter how perfect we try to be, we are going to fail at something. Counterattackers never really learn to cope with defeat. They do not take responsibility for their failures or acknowledge their limitation. However, When there is major setback, the counterattack collapses. When this happens, they often fall apart and become very depressed. Underneath, counterattackers are usually very fragile. Their superiority is easily deflated. Eventually, there is a crack in the armor, and the whole world feels as if it is collapsing. At these times, the life trap reasserts itself with enormous strength, and the original feelings of defectiveness, deprivation, exclusion, or abuse return. All three men, Alex, Brandon, and Max, have defectiveness as a core life trap. Deep down, all three feel worthless, unlovable, and defective. Yet they cope with their feelings of defectiveness in completely different ways. Alex, Brandon, and Max are relatively pure types. Each one uses one primary coping style. In fact, such pure types are rare. Most of us use a combination of surrender, escape, and counterattack. We must learn to change these coping styles in order to overcome our life traps and become healthy again. The next chapter shows you how to confront your life traps effectively without surrender, without escape, and without counterattack. Now, that was it. Thank you guys. Have a good one.